For God, for country, for truth, for justice, for the Republic. You're listening to the Powder Monkey Podcast on PirateInfoWars.com. Episode 31 of the Powder Monkey Podcast. This episode I am going to entitle Firestorm. And the reason I'm doing that is my guest today is Brenda Arthur. She previously displayed a poster at the West Virginia State Capitol of the burning of the Twin Towers with Congresswoman Omar's picture beneath it. And so this set off a firestorm in West Virginia and even across the country. Brenda is a citizen activist in West Virginia. Her focus is centered on informing and educating the people and elected officials in West Virginia about the refugee business and also the various ways in which our nation and state are being invaded by illegals, Muslims, and other such groups that are working to destroy our constitutional republic. The Muslim invasion has taken on special significance due to all it implies about the hijrah and that Muslims are commanded to perform. Brenda's been working with a number of West Virginia delegates and state senators to get a Refugee Information bill passed, as well as an ALAC law and an amendment to West Virginia's FGM law, which passed back in 1999 but allows for medical necessity. So, Brenda, welcome to the Powder Monkey Podcast. Welcome aboard. I'm glad to have you on.
Thank you so much, Sean. I appreciate your invitation and being here.
Well, it's been a little bit in coming. We played email tag a little bit, but you had quite a bit to that you were handling at the time. So I'm glad we finally got together on it. Let's start, I guess, with this. There's a lot to unpack. I've listened to several of your interviews, and they've all been fantastic. But in your interviews, I heard, you were trying to shove everything into one segment. So I really want to let you unpack what you're doing for the audience, and we'll discuss it as it goes. But I guess first, off the bat, how did this all begin for you? Where did it go from one day, everything was just America, and the next there was this dark specter, I'm assuming. How did it begin for you?
Well, I'd really have to go back a ways. I lived in Southern California for 37 years prior to moving back here to West Virginia in June of 2013. And during those 37 years, I would come here and visit my family. My sister's lived here, all of her life, and would visit family members and so forth. And I remember one day being at her house, and at the time, I don't even think Fox News was available. It was just CNN primarily. But I remember seeing a congressman in the well of the house, and Tom Tancredo from Colorado, in fact, and he's not been in the Congress for a very long time now, but he was up there, and he had all these posters and diagrams and so forth, and he was talking about illegal immigration and the impact that was having on our nation. And I had one of those aha moments when the light bulb went on. And I sat up on the side of the bed there, my sister's one of the bedrooms in her house, and I put my feet on the floor, and I said out loud to myself, I am living this in Southern California. So I made it my business when I returned home to affiliate myself with people who knew about this, people who were involved fighting it, and finding out more about it, what I could do. So that led me to joining an organization called CCIR, which was the California Coalition for Immigration Reform, started by a lady by the name of Barbara Coe, who was very instrumental back a number of years ago with Prop 187. That may ring a bell with some people. That was a proposition that the people of California passed to say, we don't want to pay for the schooling and all of these healthcare needs and so forth of these illegals coming into our state. But as it often happens, one judge put an injunction on that, and it never came to fruition in California. So it was really an uphill battle there. But it opened my eyes, Sean, to what was happening. So from there, I would really say I fast forward to West Virginia when I moved back here in June of 2013. And I told my sister that at some point this battle was coming to West Virginia. And that, a lot of people think, oh, that's California, that's New York, that's Texas, or whatever. But somehow West Virginia seemed like it was in a bubble, maybe, in some respects, and not being impacted by a lot of this. So I think my sister at the time sort of took it with a grain of sand. But when I got back here in June of 2013, and after I got my feet on the ground from that big move, I noticed that here in South Charleston, the largest mosque, in fact, in the state of West Virginia is here in South Charleston. It's called the Islamic Association of West Virginia. And to go to my sister's house without getting on the freeway, the surface street I go by runs by there, by this mosque. So every time I'd go back and forth to my sister's house to visit her, I had to pass by this mosque. And I noticed that they were in a building program. I was seeing dumpsters and all kinds of equipment out there and men working on the building. And I said to my sister, I said, are there that many Muslims here in Charleston that they have this big mosque, or that they are in this building program to expand it? And my sister said, well, I really don't know. I don't know anything about it. It's been here a while. So it was one of those things, Sean, I kind of made a mental note of and thought, okay, I'll just keep this in mind and see what develops. Well, about that time, we're getting into 2014, 2015 now, and about that time is when I started seeing in many places on the internet information about the Obama administration and all the refugees they were bringing into this country, and so forth. And I have to tell you, I prayed probably for about 2 years that God would raise someone up to fight this battle and to address these issues and to speak out about them and inform people. And believe me, I had no intention that it would be me. Excuse me. I had no thought that I wanted to do this. I felt totally inadequate to the job and knew nothing about refugees and the refugee business and so forth. So after praying for this period of time, it finally occurred to me I was the one being tapped on the shoulder.
Right.
And thought, well, if not me, who? You get to that point. So I remember it was about November of 2015. I was at my house one day. My sister calls me and she says, did you see on Facebook that there's going to be a rally in downtown Charleston? And this was November 20-something of that year. And she said they're going to be rallying about bringing Syrian refugees into Charleston. And I said, no. I said I didn't know anything about it. And I said, when is it? She said, 5 o'clock. And so I called a few people, tried to get them to meet me. Nobody met me. Nobody went with me. But I got down there on the boulevard, and I was the only person there. And there were probably about 150 leftists that had gathered, and Muslims that had gathered there on the boulevard to show their support for bringing refugees into West Virginia. Mm-hmm. And so finally, a little guy, a Vietnam vet, joined me. And so there were just the two of us on that very cold November day. And as the rally broke up, the police officers were there and all. And as the rally broke up, there were people that came by and gave me, that wonderful salute with the middle finger.
Oh, yeah.
The middle finger.
Yep. And
said certain things. And, why do you hate refugees? And I said, I don't hate refugees. I said, I just think that the people, the impoverished people of Appalachia and West Virginia, come before they do.
And let's address that now, because with Syria, one of the things that was underreported, but it's out there. It can be found if this strikes a chord with somebody and they want to look. It's out there to be found. But they changed the age of these Syrian refugees and how their treatment, how they were to be treated, and fighting age men, if I'm correct, were the main group coming in. Is that correct?
Yes, you are correct. In fact, I have a number of articles and confirmation from back in those days in 2015 where the Obama administration had virtually wiped out any vetting of these people. Mm-hmm. And I have that documented. And along with that, this group that had organized this rally back in November of 2015, I later found out that they had organized themselves and their sole purpose, or primary purpose, I should say, was to bring Syrian Muslims, not just refugees in general, but Syrian Muslims, right, into Charleston, and of course throughout the state. And if you'll remember, back then, the whole Middle East was on fire. Yeah. And Syria, all the war in Syria and all that was going on. And I was finally starting to make some contacts with people around here in Catholic Charities. I spoke with the refugee person there who administers their program, and she told me this, and it came directly from her, mm-hmm. that these people had come to her, the Muslims here in Charleston or South Charleston, had come to her and wanted her to focus on bringing Syrian Muslims into Charleston under the refugee program. Mm-hmm. And this was about the time of the Charlie Hebdo mm-hmm. murders and all that was going on there. And she said, well, I don't know, I think we should hold off on that. Let's see what settles out. And so they didn't like her response. So they went out and formed their own organization called WVIRM, standing for West Virginia Interfaith Refugee Ministry. Right. Yeah. So with that, they moved ahead. In fact, they applied to the State Department to become the second refugee resettlement contractor in West Virginia. For about 38 years up to that point, only Catholic Charities had a contract with or through the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops to bring refugees in here. Mm-hmm. So now this second group wants to bring refugees in. And in fact, they had an article in the Charleston Gazette-Mail back in May of 2016. And the article said that they wanted to bring hundreds of refugees. Not just a few families, Sean, to help some people out. Mm-hmm. And I learned this is not about humanitarianism. It's about, as you said, the hijrah. And we can talk more about that later. Right. But they literally wanted to bring hundreds in. And I have a copy of that article. And when I read that, contrary to what I was being told by certain elected officials that I had been contacting to find out what they knew about this. In fact, are refugees coming into Charleston, into West Virginia? This made it real. you know. So I had started to contact, in fact, different legislators, House of Delegates members at the time, state senators, some couple of the mayors, the mayor of Charleston, the mayor of South Charleston. And again, I'm coming from a point, I know nothing about this, and just felt pretty inadequate to even know what to say to them. And all the word that I got from all of them was, well, this is a federal program, rather, and you know, the state's not involved in this. So I thought, well, you know, is that the case? You know, because I didn't know where else to go from this point. But then, you know, I mentioned the rally in November of 2015 when they got together. So after this rally, I thought, well, I'm going to contact the governor's office. Governor Tomlin was in at the time. And surely the governor will know, right, if we have refugees coming in. So I did that, and actually I did get a call back in early December, about a week later, from his then Chief of Staff, Chris Stadelman. And he told me, no, the governor has not been told that West Virginia is getting any refugees. So I thought, well, okay, that's how I can't go any higher than that. I don't know where else to go.
Right.
So I just put it on the back burner at that time, and then I have to fast forward from that December of 2015 to May of 2016 when this article appeared in the Gazette Mail, and it was now for real. And then I found out that Charleston had been targeted under the Obama administration as one of 47 cities in which they were going to expand this refugee racket.
Right.
And I have to call it a racket. You know, people tend to think, oh, that's so wonderful, it's humanitarian and all that. No, it may surprise some people, maybe not, to know that the two co-sponsors of this Refugee Act of 1980 were Ted Kennedy and Joe Biden. They were the sponsors. Jimmy Carter signed it into law. Yeah, about 9 or 10 months or so before Reagan took office. And as I understand it, one of the big issues at the time for people who were opposed to it, that was probably the Republicans, that was the whole point about this will change the demographics of America. Because we had always brought in refugees, you know, and I am not anti-refugee, but I am against the business of refugees and the racket, and foisting a permanent program on the American people now for over 40 years, which was set up to change the demographics of America.
So, talking about demographics, and I don't know if you have this or if you know this, but let's talk for a minute about what Catholic charities were, you know, what was the mix of faiths that came across? We're using the word refugees, but how many, were, that comes in, if you know the number. What's the mix? Christian, Muslim? I mean, just what is the mix of faiths that they bring in as a whole?
Well, in the past, I would have been able to give you that information.
I didn't. I don't want to put you on the spot there.
But let me tell you why that's not available now. Because they're under a website called RAPSNet,
Gotcha.
WRAPSNET, rapsnet.org. They had an interactive section on that website, Sean, where you could go and every day you could see the numbers of refugees that were coming into the country. You could find out what states they were going to, even what towns they were going to. You could find out their religion and so forth. Well, under the Obama administration, that number of Muslims jumped significantly. But my focus was more on the numbers prior, over the period of time that I could get that information. And that website did go back to 2003. So anything before that was archived where you couldn't, access it, I guess, without a FOIA request. But from 2003 to July of 2019, West Virginia got 197 refugees. They were from Burma. Some were from Eritrea. I didn't even know where Eritrea was. I found out it's the Horn of Africa. They were from Ethiopia, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Uganda, and Vietnam. And so, the legislators that I've talked to over time, and even others, have said, well, 197 people, refugees over, a 16-year period? That's not very many. And I said, no, you're right. West Virginia's numbers have been small, but that's about to change. And we knew that West Virginia had been targeted under the Obama administration. And so this second refugee group, resettlement group I mentioned just earlier, they were approved on December 21 of 2016 to bring these hundreds of refugees into Charleston that they had wanted to bring. Well, we all know Trump won the election about a month before or so, month and a half.
Right.
And that never happened. They got put on hold. And during these last 4 years, when Trump was in office, they talked about making up for what they call the lost Trump years. And so to me, that just said, these towns, small town America we're talking about, which is part of changing the demographics of America, that they were going to fulfill their mission that they had. And in fact, Biden has said with the numbers that he wants to bring in, it would be about, over an 800% increase in the numbers from the Trump years that he wants to bring. So if that's the case and they're able to do this, I mean, look at how our border's being invaded now, and I call it an invasion.
It is. And the children, the child trafficking. Go ahead, yeah.
These people, are claiming asylum. So they're coming here as illegals. They're turning themselves in, to our Border Patrol. And then what they're doing is they're claiming asylum, so they get a court date for which they never come back for.
Right.
However, if they are granted asylum status, then they have the same rights and privileges that you or I do as American citizens, as far as everything goes, and for any type of benefits and services. The people tend to get refugees and asylees mixed up. The only difference between a refugee and an asylee is how they get to our country. A refugee is brought here by one of 9 contractors with the State Department. An asylee comes to our country maybe on a tourist visa or a student visa, or somehow gets in here, comes in illegally, and then they turn themselves in for asylum. But a refugee or an asylee get the same status in terms of benefits that they receive, which it's everything. They get housing subsidies, they get Medicaid, they get TANF, or temporary assistance to needy families, which is cash welfare. They get what's called SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition for Assistance Program, which is the old food stamp program. They get interpreters.
Right.
You can go. There's a whole massive list of benefits they get.
Now, in listening to one of your, other interviews, do I get this right that they actually receive more than, say, a disabled veteran would receive in benefits total?
Well, when they arrive here, I'm not sure how much a disabled vet gets. So
sure. 100% or something, like that. Just,
It depends. They could possibly. I mean, when you add up all these benefits and services together, if you add up, let's say, Medicaid for a family of 4, when they arrive here, somebody from the Refugee Resettlement Agency goes to the airport, picks them up. They're expecting them to arrive. And that day, Sean, or the next day, depending upon their arrival time, they are taken to the welfare office. And they get a Social Security number. They get signed up for their Medicaid, and they get signed up for their food stamps or SNAP, and all of the benefits they're entitled to. So now when they do arrive, Catholic Charities gets $950 per head for each refugee that's brought here. The refugee family or individual, each individual in the family, gets, I think it's $1,125. It's either $1,125 or $1,025. I can't remember.
Okay.
But let's say $1,100 to make it even. So if you have a family of 4, each one of those people is getting $1,100. That's $4,400.
Sure.
So Catholic Charities is not doing this out of the goodness of their heart or humanitarianism or their spiritual, need. They're not passing the plate on Sunday, so to speak, and getting this money. You and I are paying for it for the most part. In fact, 90% of what they get comes from our tax dollars. You'll have people like Rabbi Yarecki, who's really a socialist. He's well known here in Charleston. Mm-hmm. He's at the forefront of every socialist cause that there is. And I'll just say it like it is. He lies about this. He will be on the radio. In the past, I've heard him or TV program and say that this is federal money, that there's absolutely no state money involved in this to bring these refugees here. Well, that's just a total lie.
Right.
First of all, I'd like to inform Rabbi Yarecki that federal money is our money.
Absolutely.
What is it that he doesn't get about that? But aside from that, the people of West Virginia are paying for these other services. We're paying to have refugee kids in our schools, our public schools.
Right.
The average cost to educate one student for a school year is about $11,000.
Mm-hmm.
The federal government kicks in about 10% of that, so there's about a $10,000 net cost to the people of West Virginia for every refugee kid that's in our public schools. The people of West Virginia, there's a state refugee coordinator that's in the West Virginia State Refugee Plan. So she has a salary that's paid for by the people of West Virginia, mm-hmm. and she also has benefits that are paid for. In addition to that, we pay for the cost of interpreters if they're needed for medical care or legal services or whatever is the case. We pay for cash welfare payments, mm-hmm. the TANF that I mentioned earlier, and also we pay a percentage of the Medicaid. And I'm not an expert on this, but let me just tell you what I found out through my research. With Medicaid, the state of West Virginia has to front the money for that, for anybody on Medicaid. Mm-hmm. And each state gets a reimbursement from the federal government, and I guess it's different for every state. West Virginia gets reimbursed about 75%, as I understand it, for the cost of Medicaid. So the other 25%, the people of West Virginia are bearing that cost that we pay for through our taxes. Mm-hmm. So when I hear people like Rabbi Yarecki or others say there are no costs to the state of West Virginia, that's just a lie. I mean, it's just totally untrue.
Speaking of, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, you mentioned a lie, and I thought that would be a good segue. We mentioned the word the hijrah, but mm-hmm. let's talk about another word, taqiyya.
Yes. So,
you had, in listening to some of your interviews, you mirrored some of the things, I guess, that word for word almost, that I had mentioned to Dave Gobbets in our interview. You called the situation an onion. That there's layers of it, and the more you peel back, the more it makes your eyes water, basically.
Yeah.
But and you also mentioned that it seems like a lot of things. We keep talking about the people of West Virginia, but you mentioned something, and you said to paraphrase, it seems like a lot of things come out of Chicago. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the people of West Virginia, I mean, I think the first thing we need to understand if we're going to fight it, and we need to, we have to get mad about it. We have to see what's happening and who's manipulating. And so I just thought I would ask you and let you maybe expand upon that, and maybe as far as the man behind the curtain, if you would. I mean,
yes.
Expand upon that.
With that term takia, yes, maybe some of your listeners are familiar with it, but for those who aren't, it's deception. That's what it is. And Islam not only teaches takia, it's part of their practice. They are permitted and endorse lying to the infidel, which they consider us, all non-Muslims, in order to advance the cause of Islam. In fact, they are even permitted, Sean, you may know this, to put their hand on the Quran and swear and tell a lie to you if it advances the cause of Islam or if it protects another Muslim. So as long as we're in what's called the lower house, and that the lower house means that the Muslims are not totally in control, but I would almost refute that fact in places like Michigan and Minnesota, where the large Muslim populations really have taken over. We see the byproduct of that with Ilhan Omar in Congress and Rashida Tlaib in Congress. But once what's called the upper house is reached, they're in control. According to what I understand about Islamic ideology, then they don't have to, or there's no need to, or they're not permitted to practice taqiyya, because then they have all the infidels under subjugation. And so that need to lie in order to advance Islam doesn't exist as much. So, it's a very deceptive ideology. And, a lot of people will say, well, wait a minute, they have a right to their religion, but there is no ideology. It's really an ideology more than it is a religion. It has sprinklings, if you will, of religion in it. But the ideology is one of deception. It's one, what a good person, so to speak, follows a prophet that who was a murderer, a thief, a thug, a pedophile, and a rapist. That's what their prophet Muhammad was. And so when I hear that term, a good Muslim and so forth, I just am kind of gobsmacked by that, because really, how are you a good person if you're lying in order to advance your religion or your ideology, or if you're following a man who did all of these things? And promoted, stealing and rape and child rape, and so forth. It's just, it runs totally counter to our Judeo-Christian thinking.
It does. And, to go even further, it goes against our supposed, and I think it's always funny when the inclusive crowd, the people who, everything has to be inclusive. They want it to be inclusive until it becomes a thought that they, or a statement that they can't tolerate. And when it becomes that point, then you don't. It's kind of like it's just and it blows my mind that more people can't see it. I don't understand, why we give these people such a platform. Well, I do understand, because it's all a psyop. It really is, it is a. Again, I think there's a deeper root. You talk about the people just pouring in over at the borders, and then you see them come through. I don't know if you've seen what the coverage. Not very many people will cover it. InfoWars is at the border right now, covering it. The people just being bussed in, the manila envelopes that they're given, and then they just, like you said, they just go off into the wild blue yonder. Also, not just the people that are going in the vetting, but these children that come in, the vetting for those people. Do we have to go back and, cover all the sting operations, all the things that have been going on, over the last few years that we've seen, even here in West Virginia. And so it blows my mind that people don't see, or care enough to do more than just vote, if that makes sense. And then when they do, they vote wrong, and it's because I feel that they're manipulated. I did a lot of knocking, Brenda, and I guess when people think of West Virginia, they think of the moderate Democrat, or they used to, the Reagan Democrats, or but. I just don't, we've been, again, overtaken this. We've been, I guess, as the American population, we've been given a strong delusion, I think. And it's just the willingness of people to believe a lie. But you mentioned, you're no stranger to the, people pointing fingers at you and calling it hate speech. But Sharia, by definition, by the liberal definition, the legal definition, is abusive or threatening speech or writing that expresses prejudice against a particular group, especially on the basis of race, religion, or sexual orientation. Now, if I remember correctly, there's parts in there about throwing people off roofs, and if we're going to be a pure Muslim, I understand, where I was getting it wrong before I interviewed Dave. If we're going to be a pure Muslim, we have to hold to those precepts and Sharia. Is that not correct?
Oh, without a doubt, yes. That is the goal, is to establish their caliphate, with Sharia being the law of the land. They want to do away with our constitutional republic. They want to put us under subjugation and where Islam rules. And that is a diabolical plan. They're trying to break America apart right now. We're seeing it in so many ways, where what Jim Simpson and others have called the red-green axis.
Yes.
The red being the communists, the green being Muslims or Islam. And they have literally joined forces, if you will, to break this country apart. Back in 2015, Nihad Awad, who's the executive director of CARE, when I think it was the first time most of us had heard of BLM, or Black Lives Matter, at a conference, he said, Black Lives Matter is our matter. So, they're not even subtle about it anymore, Sean. They're out there saying every kind of thing that's, in fact, part of it's just insane. The things. I heard the other day, they're saying now that trees are racist. Math is racist.
Right.
I mean, these are just concepts.
Bill Burr is racist because he married a black woman. That's that was a headline, an actual headline. It's not the Babylon Bee. That was an actual headline.
You just really are startled and kind of scratch your head at the insane statements that these people make, and what they embrace is truth. And you said something about a strong delusion. That's the only explanation that you can come up with, is that these people are totally deluded. That there is a satanic delusion that has their eyes covered or something. And it's just stunning, to see what's happening before our very eyes. And
I think that, I think every family has it. I think everybody sees it. Every family sees it. But you had mentioned in an interview when I was doing some research, that you've, just through your relatives and your loved ones, and their, I guess, significant others that, the liberal mentality and the mindset, and I live it, I do, and I believe that the people that are close to me, I believe they really, in their heart, they think that they're doing something good, but they are just not willing to believe that, other than what they've been told, everything else is racist or homophobic or bigoted, or and it's just it's just the hypocrisy is just so. Why aren't we canceling Sharia? Why isn't Sharia canceled? And
well, see, this is part of the deception with changing the language, like we were talking just earlier about taqiyya. They will take certain words and phrases and things, and they will control the narrative about them and describe them. What they call hate speech is just somebody else's different opinion.
Absolutely.
You know, they call it hate speech to shut you up and to minimize you and take away your freedom of speech.
Eric Blair referred to it as newspeak, I believe, or or better known as, I guess, his pen name, George Orwell. So it's they changed the I mean, if you really look at that, that wasn't a. He didn't just come up with that like George Lucas in Star Wars, which there are conspiracy theories about that as well, but that's another episode. But, it's just, that was a plan. Aldous Huxley, if you look at who he was related to, these are the architects of what we see now, what is happening before our eyes, and we're going to get into, I hope, talks about, we're going to talk maybe about here in a little bit about, we'll unpack how everybody that's listening to this broadcast, the fact that what we're recording right now is being run through filters and, the things that, everything, you cannot evade it. It is here. And it's way worse and way more powerful than Big Brother ever was perceived to be. But, I'm going to ask you something and see if you know this name. Now, I don't know if she's still, didn't really do much of a deep dive. There was a lot to go through. But do you know the name Alexandra Gallo? Does that ring a bell?
It sort of does, but I couldn't tell you why or where.
Well, again, it's like an onion. And like Dave and I talked about, there's acronyms, and the acronyms change, but the philosophy and the agenda and, really the people stay the same. So I ran into some people when the president was here in 2017. Mm-hmm. He gave a speech at the Boy Scout Jamboree. And, a board member, it's on my website. I have the video where she took credit for I see these people, and I'm going on a tangent here, but basically, Brenda, she was a board member for the West Virginia Interfaith Refugee Ministry. I've got her on film in my neighborhood yelling, "Healthcare is a human right, not just for the rich and white." That's racist.
Yeah, it is.
That's racist.
But all these things that they're saying and doing to exempt white people, they do not see as racist.
No, but because that's an agenda. There's nothing new under the sun, and that's another thing. This is just the wheel coming back around. It's just a different group of people that it's happening to. Mm-hmm. And so, again, it's an onion, and I just thought I would touch on that. I didn't mean to derail us where we were going with everything. But you really, from social media to the news, in a lot of respects, you've really gotten an unfair shake. I've been a member of your Facebook group there, and I've seen the shadow banning and the Facebook jail and the being afraid to even who you can let into your circle, because you never know what they're going to do or how they're going to attempt to assassinate your character.
Exactly. In fact, when I get a request for somebody to join Secure WV, I try to check them out as best I can.
Sure.
I look to see who their friends are. I look to see how many groups they belong to and what groups. When I see somebody who's been on Facebook for 11 years, has no friends, and belongs to 193 groups, I am not going to add them
right
to Secure WV, because I'm suspect, about who they are and what their motive is.
Mm-hmm. With it, I guess going into I don't know, is there anything else maybe you wanted to cover or address as far as, laying the, I guess, the groundwork? I know that we talked about, your background and everything like that, but maybe moving into the Firestorm itself, maybe setting up for that and maybe discussing that a little bit, and because there's a lot there just with that, and I want to make sure that everybody gets their voice heard, and we'll get into that more, but let's talk about the poster incident and what happened there.
Okay. Oh, do you want me just to run with that?
Yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
Okay. This goes back, almost 2 years ago now. Well, over 2 years ago. It was March 1st of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Republicans, for the first time ever, because the Republicans now have been in charge of the state, for a long for 6 years now, going 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
But for the first time, as I understand it, they had a Republican Day at the state capitol. And, of course, this didn't set well with the Democrat communists. I call them Democrat communists because they have gone so far, many of them, that I just don't even see them as socialists anymore, frankly, Sean.
Right.
But anyway, so the Republicans had this day, and I was invited back, in fact, the December before. So about 3 months prior, I had been invited to come and set up a table that day.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would welcome that and an opportunity. At the time, I had an ACT chapter here in West Virginia. And so I was happy to promote that and also to give people copies of the West Virginia Refugee Plan, which most people have never even seen. Our legislators didn't even know that the state of West Virginia had a refugee plan until I started showing it to them and telling them about it. So I get there that day, set everything up, and the floor session for the House of Delegates always starts, or I say always, probably always, or most always, at 11 o'clock every morning during the session. And so I was out there, had my table set up, and a name that a lot of people are familiar with, Mike Pushkin, who's a Democrat communist delegate from here in Charleston. And he comes up to my table, and I've had run-ins with him before, so he comes up and he starts looking at my materials and starts taking pictures of some of the things that I have on my table and the posters. And he says, "Why are you doing this?" And, starts confronting me about it. And he started rifling through my things, and he took copies of various handouts and so forth, which I knew.
Sure.
He was going to make a problem about it, but that was okay, It was there for anybody who wanted to take a copy. And so a few minutes later, he comes back to my table. And frankly, I have to tell you, I'm glad that I had a table between me and these men. There were, I guess, about probably 8 men screaming and yelling and F you, and we're going to have you thrown the F out of here. And you're a racist, and all those names that they call you. And Mike Caputo especially was just like a wild, crazy street thug, flailing his arms and screaming and cursing at me. And so this went on. When you're in the middle of something like that, you kind of lose track of time.
Sure.
And so eventually, because the floor session was starting, they left my table. And as I said, I was glad there was some room between me and them, because I'm not so sure but what some of them would have gotten in my face and maybe gotten a little physical.
Right.
But anyway, so they go up the few stairs there from the rotunda into the house, into the floor session, and they carry this on into the session there. And in fact, Sharon Malcolm, who was a delegate at the time, she's passed away since, but
yes,
she told me that Caputo gouged her in the side to push her out of the way, because he was like insane, his actions. It's hard to believe that we have elected representatives who behave this way in public, but nonetheless, he gouged her out of the way. And Sharon later told me that from the day that he did that, she'd had a mastectomy on that side, and where he gouged her. And from that day, she was in pain. And because I saw her in August of 2019 at the Republican picnic, and by December, she'd passed away. So it's just a little too close.
and I want to point out, and, maybe, like I said, we can take a deep dive into that. You can take that where you want to, but she happened to pass away. There were charges pending, and if I understand correctly, she passed away on the same day that Delegate Caputo was to, I guess, go to trial for this. Am I correct in that?
That's what I understand, yes.
Okay.
He had battery charges that were filed against him. And Sharon had even told me, she couldn't wait to testify and so forth. Well, isn't it ironic that she passed away that weekend before that Monday?
Right.
I mean, it just, it leaves a question mark in your mind as to what happened.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, and he even, it was all about women. I mean, he was cursing at Ann Lieberman, who was the Sergeant at Arms at the time, and also Diana Graves, another delegate, and he was just out of control. Well, finally, I guess he simmered down. Now, they were in session there, Sean, and I don't know how long they had been in. I'm standing out there in the rotunda by my table, and different other vendors are coming up to me and saying, boy, that was something, and what happened there. And I said, did anybody get that on their phones? Trying to find somebody. And so the Speaker of the House, Roger Hanshaw, sent someone to me to tell me, you are to take that poster down, or I'm going to throw you and all these other vendors out of the Capitol. So
basically, I mean, there's no way to spin that. They are violating your free speech. Yeah. I mean, it's not the way I see it, Brenda, is some people protested something. So, that's how I see it. What did you do? Ilhan Omar can be anti-Semitic. She can be associated with the worst ideology in world history. I mean, but again, why wasn't Mike Caputo canceled? Why wasn't he ever, I mean, as I understand it, he got immunity.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he did. In fact, that's how he was let off the hook, is that he had legislative immunity because this happened, during the session at the Capitol. Well, can a delegate do anything then and have legislative immunity? He committed battery on another delegate.
Right. Well, and there were multiple injuries that day, if I understand. And maybe I'd like you, if you know the skinny on that, maybe I'd like you to, expand up on that. The Sergeant of Arms. In my mind, if I were the Sergeant of Arms, they would have been exiting. Not me. I wouldn't have been resigning.
Well, there was such a blow up there. Anne told me afterward, she didn't talk to anybody for several days because she was just so overcome by the whole thing.
Right.
But she offered to tender her resignation to Hanshaw, the Speaker. And instead of him being, in my opinion, being a stand-up guy and say, no, let's see what happened here. Let me investigate this thing, and get everybody's side, and we'll see about that later. He welcomed her resignation, right there. To me, that just shows a weakness, not wanting to deal with it.
Brenda, like I said, I knocked doors. I did a lot for the Republican Party, as a volunteer during that time, because, again, I felt like it was, if not me, who? Mm-hmm. And that was literally just about it. And like I said, the people that I ran into, even though they were registered hard blue, they would all say it was the same thing I heard knocking doors. I'm a Democrat, but my party's left me behind. Mm-hmm. And things like this never get out. I keep my ear to the grindstone. I didn't go deep enough into Sharon Malcolm. I didn't go deep enough, into the literal, like you said, thuggery that some of our elected representatives have done. But they're given a free pass. And
yes. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. This is your interview. I'm just getting a little fired up.
No.
So, like I said,
we're just having a conversation.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, when Caputo left my table, I should back up there a minute and say, during the Pledge of Allegiance and the prayer, the sergeant at arms or the doorkeepers are supposed to keep those doors shut. They don't get to interrupt that. That's part of the protocol they have. But Caputo goes up there, and there's a young doorkeeper on the other side, and you can see there's glass there, so you can see through who's on the other side, that there's someone standing there.
Oh, wow.
And this young doorkeeper was about 20, I call him a kid, 20 years old, but Caputo slams the doors open with both hands, knocks this young doorkeeper down. I guess he was able, from what I understand, to kind of catch the handle of the door to keep from being knocked all the way to the floor. But at the time, we thought that he had broken ribs. So he knocks this kid down. Then he goes to Sharon Malcolm and gouges her. And then he's also cursing, at Diana Graves and others. And, Pushkin he wasn't doing it inside the session as far as I know. But there were three of the primary ones. I call them the capital gang. There was Caputo, Pushkin, and Angelucci. They were the three. And unfortunately now Caputo's in the West Virginia Senate. So Marion County just put him, the people there just put him in the West Virginia Senate after 20 years or 20 some years in the House of Delegates.
Well, after, Joe Biden, nothing surprises me. So, I mean, but, again, that's a whole nother episode there as well. But, the good thing though, Brenda, is that there was an apology issued. The bad thing is it was to, actually the, care, basically. Yes. So maybe let's get into that, because that letter, issued by, Ken Hicks, that wasn't an apology. It was a dog groveling to its master.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to be blunt, and that's what it was. And if he wants to refute that, he's more than welcome to give me a call. I'll be more than happy to discuss it with him, or Pushkin, Caputo. I would more than love to have that conversation. But we're not doing that now. But, it's just that for people who have never seen it, I highly recommend looking into, to everything Brenda has, everything documented, and read the letter for yourself. Go that far, and then maybe you'll get angry. Maybe you'll want to do something. But
before I get into that, the letter that they sent, just to finish my thought about when the speaker, Roger Henshaw, sent an emissary, if you will, to me to tell me to take my poster down, the one with the burning Twin Towers and Ilhan Omar. It said, you said you'd never forget. I'm proof that you've forgotten at the bottom. Well, what happened is that I stood there for, 10, 15 seconds probably, sort of astounded at this and thinking, and I said to this person, I said, wait a minute. I said, this is the people's house. I'm in perfect order. I haven't done anything. These other vendors here haven't done anything. But the reason I did, I finally took it down, and the only reason I did, Sean, was because I didn't think it was fair to these other vendors that had come, maybe driven 2 or 3 hours. Some of them spent their own money to put out their display tables and so forth. I didn't think it was fair to them to be thrown out. About when they had maybe 4 hours left to go, 3 or 4 hours left to go there. So I took the poster down, and I put up another one. I have many posters that I've had made that really, they're worth 10,000 words. Some of these memes you see. And I put up one that has a picture of an Appalachian family, and it says that impoverished Appalachians, should come before refugees.
I'm going to point.
You know that I had Democrat communists come by my table after that and say to me, "That's disgusting." That is disgusting.
Of course it is. Of course they would say that. That would be, what other, emotion have they been programmed to feel for the last, how long, 12 plus years now, longer than that? I mean, it really ramped up during the Obama administration,
Yes.
but, and it's just, it is it blows my mind. And like I said, if people read the article, and with you, one thing else I want to point out is that you don't have a special interest group funding what you do. This is all, as I understand it, you take money out of your retirement fund to do this.
That's correct.
And I want to recommend something, because I think you have a winner, but I would take that poster and make a T-shirt. But that's just
you mean
me.
the one with Ilhan Omar?
Yes.
And Bernie Twin-
Yes.
Oh, I did. I did.
Oh,
have
did
that
you?
Done.
Okay.
I had 100 T-shirts made, and I sold a few of them to people. The reason I didn't put it on the Facebook page was because I thought they may come after me.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Saying that I don't have a resale license, or some other tax issue or something.
Yeah.
When I have a lot more money into those 100 T-shirts, and I had to go about 80 miles because none of the people around here would print those T-shirts for me.
Yeah.
So I had somebody who's on, in fact, Secure WV, found a vendor for me, in another city about 80 miles away. And that's where I had those T-shirts made. And I've still got quite a number of them, in fact. My goal was to get 100 people out there in front of the Capitol and have them wearing these T-shirts.
I was actually going to offer, so I'm just going to throw this out here, okay? I'm going to throw one more word out here, and I don't know if you're familiar with this word, but do you know the word doggle?
Doggle? No, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, it's a Hebrew term, and it is to raise a flag or a standard. And so, being that you're on the pirate ship Powder Monkey, we're going to raise the flag. I will volunteer. I will get a shirt, and I will volunteer to stand there with you and beside you, and proudly defend your right to free speech. So that is just an offer. If you ever want to go back, I have your back. So I'm just going to throw that out there. But
thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I have just felt, I have them in a box, and I felt there's going to come a time for this, to revisit this. And so maybe that's the open door that you just talked about.
Well, who knows? But we have a saying here in West Virginia, I ain't scared. So, talking about printers, and, just getting the T-shirts printed. But you actually experienced censorship with the businesses that you had done business with and spent thousands of dollars with as well.
Yes, that's correct.
Talk about that.
Yeah, Office Depot. I am one of their premier members or customers because I have spent thousands of dollars every year for the last 5 years or so. And, I've had various posters made, and after this incident, in fact, there was a young guy who worked there who was a leftist, and he told some of his buddies, and, they created a problem. They told their manager, and then the manager at the Office Depot told me that they would not be making any of my posters anymore. And I said, well, that's interesting. I said, I'm one of your premier customers, and I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars here at your store. And he said, nope. He says, that's it. That's the end of the matter. And I said, well, okay. So then I had to go about looking for another vendor. Meanwhile, while I'm in this process, about a week later, I get a call from the regional manager, and I think it was in North Carolina or South Carolina, and introduced himself, and he was very apologetic. He said, I'm sorry. He said, we will be making your posters, Brenda. And he said, in fact, I want to give you a $25 gift certificate.
Nice. Okay, way to go, Office Depot. Way to go.
Yeah, so Office Depot reversed themselves because of this guy, the regional manager. But I tell you, it didn't sit well, I'm sure, with the manager at that store. So, and then I've had another vendor where I wanted to have T-shirts made, and I've also had some ball caps made, Stop the Invasion, and so forth. And she didn't want to make the T-shirts, and that's why I said I ended up going, about 80 miles out to get a vendor there that would do it.
Right.
So, it's just, you can't lay down and roll over and play dead, Sean.
So you were ostracized, but CARE not only got an apology, but they took it another step further as well, didn't they?
Yes. In fact, after that day, that incident at the Capitol, Ken Hicks, as you said, a delegate from the 19th District, he wrote a letter, and you've seen that letter. I have a copy of it and all the signatures that are on it. At the time, there were 41 Democrats in the House of Delegates, and 38 of the 41 signed this letter inviting a terrorist organization to the People's House in West Virginia.
Now, let's unpack that for a second. I want to stop there. So let's unpack that. 38 delegates invited people promoting the same ideology that we sacrifice blood, treasure, over the, how many desert storms and desert shields and all of that. And so they're inviting the same people who are actually linked to terrorist organizations, terrorist supporters, Hamas. They're inviting these people to come. Do I have that correct?
You have that exactly right, yes.
Okay.
CARE, or the Council on American Islamic Relations, is Hamas operating in America. They are a terrorist organization, and don't be fooled by the fact that they have a suit on. They're jihadis in suits. That's what they are in reality. And because they have conformed in that way and present themselves to Americans and to other, Western countries, they get more mileage out of that. They're able to make themselves appear as something they're not. Again, this practice of taqiyya, or deception.
Yes.
When in reality, their goals are all the same as the guys that, the suicide bombers, homicide bombers, all of the people that did the 9/11. I mean, they're the same. They embrace the same ideology. In fact, Sean, that's what I was trying to say with my poster. I wasn't saying that that Omar was responsible for 9/11. I was saying that she embraces the same ideology as the people who flew those planes into the towers. Now, I never got a chance to tell the Speaker of the House that, Roger Hanshaw, because, in fact, I know this because I FOIA'd his emails.
Well, why should you have to? Why should you have to?
Exactly.
But
this is how, you have to dig for some of this information. And the day that happened, the vice president of the mosque here, Sue Barazi, or Ibtisam Barazi, is her name. She sent an email to Roger Hanshaw saying how awful this was, and Muslims shouldn't be treated this way, and all the stuff they go on with about poor Muslim and so forth, and they're being discriminated against. So that was March 1st of 2019. March 4th, which is 3 days later, and the legislative session was going to be ending in a few days from there. And Roger Hanshaw writes her back, and I have these emails, so I know what I'm talking about. I have proof. Roger Hanshaw writes her back and says, well, I'm very busy right now wrapping up the legislative session. However, I would happily meet with you after the legislative session is over. So she thanks him, and I guess they met. I have not been able to get an email that said, it shows a date and a time that they met. I wrote Roger Hanshaw. I waited till about August, so from March to August. And I wrote Roger Hanshaw and introduced myself. I said, Mr. Speaker, I was the one who displayed the poster at the Capitol. We've never had a chance to talk. I'd like to meet with you, answer any questions you have, blah, blah, blah. And I waited 6 weeks for a response and wrote him again in October of 2019. And to this day, I've never had a response from Roger Hanshaw. But he can respond to the Muslim, and meet with Muslims, but not meet with, patriots, people who are concerned about the sovereignty of our state and our nation and where things are going. It's pretty distressing, frankly. Can
you speak to, I'm a follow the money person. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to that maybe? With a lot of times you get a delegates, and I'm not throwing anything out there. I'm not making any accusations, but, just, I smell smoke. I don't know if there's fire or not, but I'm just going to, I'll just leave that there. I'm just going to, I don't know.
Well, in the past, I have looked into some of the candidates or the legislators, donations, mm-hmm. and even our Congress people. I have looked into their donations, but I have about, I would say, 35 research projects, Sean, that I have on the burner. And I don't have the time to research them all, or I might do a little bit on something and then I have to put it on the back burner because something else comes along. But, as far as that goes, I would say, I have no proof of that or knowledge that there are donations going on there. But what I do think is that people like Roger Hanshaw and others they're afraid. They're just weak, spineless, girly men that won't take a stand.
They did. And I like I said, when I went to a few executive committee meetings. I volunteered but I told everybody, I said, look, they are going to silence you on social media. Mm-hmm. The people running against you, they're going to be heard. But you're going to have to find other ways to get to your constituents. You're going to have to find other ways to get to people. You're going to, I was talking about the silencing of conservatives long before it happened, long before people started getting, banned and, everything like that. And nobody would talk about it. Nobody would address it. And it is such the elephant in the room, or the since we're on the Powder Monkey podcast, the 500-pound gorilla in the room. It's, they are, their constituents are in danger of not just of it happening, but it's actually happening now as we speak. Their rights, digital rights, that, what is being sucked up by all these private companies and spit out to different organizations. We need a digital bill of rights, and within the state, it has to start. They like to say, homeland security begins with hometown security. Mm-hmm. But when patriots mention something, they get investigated.
Oh yes.
You can talk about that.
I'm sorry?
I said you can speak to that. You can talk about that.
That's another situation, yeah. When so-called leaders like Roger Hanshaw do things like this, what they're doing is they're advancing the cause of Islam. Mm-hmm. And they're elevating Islam to mainstream and glamorizing it. I mean, companies like Nike now have a hijab for women. Macy's has a line of clothing for Muslim women, and so forth. Coca-Cola during Ramadan has a symbol that they use, the crescent moon and the star that they have on their Coke bottles or cans. I mean, and that's just a handful of the things that are being done to mainstream this vile ideology and to glamorize it. And of course, in the practice of taqiyya, there are Muslim women who say, you know, that their hijabs have been pulled off or they're discriminated against and so forth. And they try to get other American women to put on the hijab in solidarity, you know, with them, when the women in Iran are fighting to take it off.
Isn't it funny that feminists, they find this, you know, just refreshing and trendy, but it literally means submission.
Yes.
It's just, I think the term is clown world, but you know, you've been investigated, for looking up public documents, you know, and it all sounded, you know, just from some of, you know, what I've read and what I've heard you speak on, it sounds, you know, very motivated, politically motivated, to me. And it just, you know, I really just, your story just goes on and on and on, but this Firestorm, you know, that, you know, with the, you know, it just is such a, to use Obama's, you know, phrase, a nothing burger, you know, you know, it's a nothing, or no, I'm sorry, that was CNN, not Obama. Well, same thing, same
and
platform.
Hillary too, I think.
Yeah.
That as well, yeah.
But you know, just the nothing burger, you know, compared to what they did in response. And you know, again, it's always the no borders, no walls, no USA at all crowd. Mm-hmm. And again, the same person. We're going to go back and we're going to just take a look at that onion. Alexandra Gallo. I have it on my website. It can be found. It's all there. It's on video. You know, they're yelling, you know, they are the no borders, no walls, no USA at all, you know, hate speech, racist, you know, I mean, all of it. Everything that they supposedly are against, I have them on video doing.
Yeah.
And but sedition on that side is fine because it's no borders, no walls, no USA at all, which takes us right back to the problem, don't we? So,
well, that's very much like the Muslim or Islamic ideology that you know, and maybe Dave brought this out in the interview with you, but if you talk to an imam, he'll say, and I've heard Dave say this, so I'm repeating something he's told me and others, but he'll ask them about terrorism. They go, oh, no, they don't believe in terrorism. You know, they don't support terrorism. And there'll be even public statements often, you know, from an Islamic leader after a certain incident. No, we're opposed to terrorism. When, in fact, this is what they teach. But, see, they don't think that Muslims commit terrorism. It's only the infidel that commits terrorism. This is where it's important to define your terms, because what a Muslim does when he commits an act like this is he's fighting for jihad. You know, he's fighting to establish the caliphate under Sharia law.
Isn't that called a fatwa?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, a fatwa is when they, as I understand it, go after somebody
specifically. Okay, all right,
or something. You know,
gotcha.
An imam will, you know, declare a fatwa, like on Pamela Geller, or you know, to have her head cut off. So yeah, I mean, this is the interesting thing. They deny terrorism and say they're opposed to it, but they're the ones committing it. Just like what you said about the very things that they say they're against, they're the ones doing it. It really is a form of insanity and I think spiritual debauchery.
I was on the I got lucky enough to make it on as a caller on the Man Cow show in 2006 2007, and we had a good conversation, and but I ended the conversation, you know, with I'm less free today than I was on September the 10th, 2001. Mm-hmm. And, you know, with what we're seeing now, you know, just going maybe a little further, you know, Islam is a conquering force. That's their objective, isn't it? Basically. Yes. So, and they've been used by people in the past. Hitler had a had a cozy relationship with him, as I understand. He used them sort of as a tool, and so again, I don't think there's anything new under the sun. And I honestly, I guess I don't want to get too metaphysical, but I think there are, to see it happen over and over again, it almost is like, they talk about these spirits. It's almost like these things jump into people and they do these things, from our elected officials to, just the zombie on the street.
Yeah. Well, you run out of rationale. You say, how can a rational person do this? And so you look for other answers to this insanity.
Right.
That's going on. And, and I guess ultimately you have to look at the spiritual side of things.
Right.
Say what is corrupt or devoid of this in this person that creates this.
So now, as I understand it, you are popular with the West Virginia Threat Fusion Center. So I'm assuming that just by default, they're probably enjoying a preview of the Powder Monkey podcast episode 31 right now, and I hope they're enjoying it. But talk about that a little bit. How it was turned around back on you as a citizen, and I'm not trying to, again, that's a hard job, keeping everybody safe, but at the same time, I just don't see how you looking up public documents, would warrant, a conversation with, a threat fusion center and an intel department. And so I'll let, maybe if you want to talk about that, maybe just, so that everybody understands just what the pushback entails when you feel like you want to speak up. And then maybe when people understand that, then maybe they need to understand, well, why is the pushback so hard just because this lady, is trying to bring attention to, this ideology that we've been at war with for decades now. But I'll let you go there. I'll let you go there.
Well, for those who may not be familiar with the fusion centers, and I wasn't very much at all. I'd heard 5 years ago, 6 years ago,
sure,
something about there was a group, an organization that was in every city across the country or town, every state rather, excuse me.
Right.
That the police and the FBI worked together and all this, but I never knew what it was called.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't familiar with it until I did become familiar with it. So,
right.
What happened, Sean, is I was on the website of the Islamic Association of West Virginia. And you're looking at all their information and their pictures and their photo gallery and so forth. And on that, and this is back, 2015, 2016, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed on that website, on the photo gallery, there was a picture of someone that astonished me, I would say. And that was Nihad Awad, the executive director of CARE in Washington, D.C., who I call the number one terrorist in America. Because he is head of CARE, the Council on American-Islamic Relations, and CARE is Hamas operating in America. So I saw him inside this mosque. There was a picture of him, mm-hmm. and the men were on the floor cross-legged, and the women were at the back of the wall sitting down, and he's obviously lecturing or speaking to them. To their ummah or to their congregation, so people understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
He was speaking to them, and I thought most people would look at this and just pass by it and say, oh, well, they had a meeting, But I knew who this guy was by now, as I had started to research so many different things.
Sure.
And so I sent this to a few people, and I said, do I have this right? Is this actually who I think this is? And they confirmed it. So from there, I was very concerned that this mosque here that's about 5 or 6 miles from my house and the biggest mosque in West Virginia, that they would have a terrorist come and speak to their congregation or their ummah. And so, again, one of those mental notes I made to myself about, I've got to keep this in mind and come back to this and find out what this is about. And so as this mosque was growing and everything, because you don't have someone come to your group or your congregation if you're not in alignment with what they're talking about or preaching.
Sure.
And that's counterproductive. You just don't do it.
Well,
so that said to me that the people in this mosque were, aligned with this, with him and with CARE and with Hamas.
And now,
so,
just I'm sorry, I don't want to, but I just want to point out as well. You've had people inside that mosque, and you've confirmed there are radical, insanely radical theology, pamphlets, access to, I think they've said over 2,000 pieces of literature in their library alone. So you went with the gut feeling, but you confirmed it. But I'm going to let you go. I'm sorry, but I just want
That's okay. Yeah, you're right. And that gut feeling I had a few years later, proved to be true when Dave Dobbins did his investigation of that mosque.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, so where was I? Kind of lost my train of thought there on that. So Nihat Awad was there. So, in January of 2019, 2019. I keep giving the dates because it helps me keep the timeline kind of in place.
Right.
But I said to a friend of mine, I said, as I mentioned, I have so many research projects I'm always working on. And I said, I want to make a FOIA request for the building plans of that mosque. I said, in fact, I think this was January 2018. Now that I correct myself, Sean.
Okay.
But nonetheless, I said, would you mind doing that FOIA request for me? It would help me out. And she said, sure. So she sent a FOIA request for Freedom of Information request to the city. I think it was the city manager of the city of South Charleston. And he responded back very promptly. And this was about mid-January of that year. And he said he set up a time and a date, January 31st, for her to come and to review the building plans of the mosque. Now, just so people know, and you said public documents. These are public documents.
Mm-hmm.
Any building, we can, we have access to that.
You went to the courthouse, right? Is that where you accessed it?
Well, no.
Okay.
It was the city building here in South Charleston.
Okay, I got you.
Is where we went. So now I did not do the FOIA request. My name was nowhere on that email or anything. But that day, and that's what makes it more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That day, now I was already on their radar, for all different groups. But that day, I met my friend there, and as I recall, I think we did sign a clipboard, as guests that we were there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were escorted into the big conference room, and on the end, one side was a 3-ring binder with the architect's report and lots of different things. And at the far end of the table were the blueprints. And so my friend went down to the far end and started looking at the blueprints. I looked through the architect's report.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to see a number of things, which I won't mention here on this podcast.
Sure.
But I was able to see how much they paid for the expansion of their mosque. It was over $1.5 million, and I was able to see what kind of bolts and screws and, things that the architect had in his report. So there were 2 men standing over us. One, I think, was the city manager, and I think the other one might have been the building engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "What are you looking for?" And I wasn't going to tell them because it's none of their business what I'm looking for. That's a public document.
Right.
And I said, well, I'll know when I find it. And so we continued there, and they walked out of the room, came right back, and my friend was taking pictures of the blueprints. And they said, you can't do that. And she said, well, this is a public record. Mm-hmm. And they had even told her previously in the email that she could have copies of anything. They just needed to know what she wanted copies of so they could tell her what they would charge for them. And now here we are on site, and they're telling us we can't have that. So she immediately, when they went out of the room, she sent those 5 or 6 pictures she took to her husband in case they were going to try to pressure her to delete them. And so we wrapped it up not too much longer after that. I think we were there 30 minutes at most. And we left that day and thinking, well, okay, this is just more information we're collecting along the way for all of this, and what the Muslims here in West Virginia are doing. Mm-hmm. And so fast forward from January 31st to March 8th, so just a little more than a month. And I was at home, but I didn't hear my door knock. However, I had gone out to get in my car, and I saw some trash in my yard. I picked up, and I noticed it was a business card. And it said on the back, "Brenda, please contact me." And it had a phone number. And it was a sergeant from the West Virginia State Police Criminal Intelligence Unit. Mm-hmm. And I thought, the first thing that occurred to me, Sean, was, well, there must be some drug activity going on in my neighborhood, and I guess he wants to talk to me.
Criminal Intelligence Unit of the West Virginia State Police. Now, I found out later, this is the division that works with the Fusion Center. Mm-hmm. And these Fusion Centers, I started to say a minute ago, were set up by Congress after 9/11, when Homeland Security was set up and all that. Mm-hmm. And the purpose was to track terrorists and narco trafficking and so forth, and to monitor them and to try to get them. And so what happened, though, Sean, because the Muslims have infiltrated every aspect of our government and society, they had infiltrated these fusion centers, especially the one in Texas I know of for sure, that they tried to destroy the former governor by the infiltration they made there. Rick Perry?
The Fusion Center.
You're referring to Rick Perry?
Rick Perry.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep.
I was there for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, I didn't know any of this, until I found out later.
Right.
And so I thought, well, okay, I'm happy to cooperate with the police, right?
Sure, absolutely.
So I called the sergeant, and introduced myself, and he had a very stern voice, I would say. And I said, "Yes, sir, how can I help you?" And he said, "We were by your house." Now, I don't know if he meant we being he represented the state police, or if he had another officer with him.
Right.
But to come, at the time I was 66 years old, to come to question a 66-year-old woman, you're going to bring 2 officers of the State Police Criminal Intelligence Unit?
Well, I do have to point out, from here on out, you've been a guest on the most dangerous podcast in the world now, so I'm just going to point that out. It'll probably be Roger Stone level raid next time. So. Well,
I'm happy to add that to my credentials.
Okay.
Anyway, he said to me, "We were by your house earlier," and he said, "I said, yes, sir," and he said, "We wanted to know why you did a FOIA request for the building plans of the mosque." Mm-hmm. And again, I had one of those things where you're kind of punched in the gut, and you what and I because I have done so many FOIA requests with so many different agencies, it didn't dawn on me at that moment that I did not even do that FOIA request.
Well, you probably had the adrenaline going at that point too. I'm sure.
Yeah, most definitely. And I thought about 10 seconds, 20 seconds into the conversation, I realized to myself, I thought, wait a minute, I didn't even do that FOIA request. But I didn't want to say my friend's name because I thought they're going to contact her anyway. Mm-hmm. Do you know, to this date, 3 years later, they've never contacted her?
Wow.
They've never even contacted her, which I'm glad. I'm happy for, her. But then he started to question me. And knowing now, I wish I had known then what I know now. You don't talk to these people, You don't talk to the FBI. You don't talk to criminal intelligence people. And even in that those articles by Leo Holman, who investigated this, Phil Haney, who's who was murdered, as you know,
Yes.
last a year ago in February, and others, Patrick Wood, who is Technocracy News. He said, you don't talk to these people because they will, you're going to be on their radar forever, first of all. And they can manipulate and do things. And I even had one person, not someone on a national level, but someone locally say, you don't know but what, they'll put drugs in your car and stop you because you rolled through a stoplight or a stop sign. And all of a sudden they happen to find, a bag of something in your car. And I thought, boy, yeah.
Sure.
These are the kind of things that they, look at, like you said, Roger Stone and some of these people, how, what the things they've done to them. I don't think anything is past their reach or their grasp in this.
No, I mean, once you build something this powerful, and again, they called it the Patriot Act. I mean, even going back that far, but there's nothing patriotic about the Patriot Act. We sacrificed liberty for security, and we never got it back.
Yes. Well, and instead of actually tracking, and I guess I'm not saying that they don't do that, but, Muslims and people who are terrorists, they turn this against American citizens, vets, former military people, people who say anything against Islam, or against the system, the establishment. That's who they're investigating now. And once you get on their radar, I wasn't even sure if I could get certain things renewed, licenses, because they might impede that. I haven't traveled since then on an airplane, and now with COVID, I'm not sure that I ever will.
Well,
with the restrictions, but they're capable of a lot.
Well, let's look at Laura Loomer. I mean, she lost her, Ubers? She lost her bank accounts. She was put on a terrorist watch list. And again, this is just shocking because I don't know, and I'm just going to ask this. It may be pretty obvious, and I'm sure you did, but the sergeant that questioned you, did you ever forward any of the intel that you've gathered, and from Dave especially, and say, hey, maybe you should take a look at this? They want to subdue your daughters and kill your sons, and they want to do really bad things to the people that we're trying to be so inclusive of.
Well, here's the shocking thing, and I heard this comment when I was at the city hall there in South Charleston, looking at the building plan documents of the mosque. Mm-hmm. I heard this comment, and I also heard this sergeant say it to me over the phone. Because I told him, I said, well, Sergeant, what prompted this was I saw a picture of a terrorist that was speaking at this mosque. And you guys in law enforcement always say, see something, say something.
Absolutely. I have that written down in my notes. Yeah. I have that written down in my notes.
Be aware of your surroundings, your community, what's going on in your neighborhood. So when I saw this, that he was there, I was concerned. And here's the comment he made back to me. We have a very good relationship with the mosque.
Right.
And that was exactly the same phrase I heard from the city people at South Charleston that said to me, we have a very good relationship with the mosque. So I thought, okay, well, I'm connecting these dots for sure.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And that just verified to me what I had been hearing and reading from Dave and John Guandolo and Jim Simpson and so many others along the way about how the Muslims have infiltrated these different governmental organizations. Mm-hmm. And they convinced them. Now, what I did do, I sent the first person I called was Phil Haney. And I said, Phil, I got to talk to you about something. And told him what had occurred. In fact, Leo Holman, you probably saw that comment from him. He said, you never talk to them, Brenda.
Yeah.
And so forth. But I asked him, what should I do? And he said, well, the first thing you need to do is document this because you'll lose some of it if you don't, so document it right away.
Sure.
And so I did that. And, I was told to contact a couple of the law firms, that do pro bono work for conservatives. I think I contacted American Center for Law and Justice and a couple of others, Liberty Counsel, and I couldn't get any traction from anybody on this, Sean. They all told me they had federal cases or were, overwhelmed with federal cases and things that they were involved in.
Mm-hmm.
Which, okay, this is just a little incident, one person in West Virginia.
Uh-huh.
But what I finally did in a few months later is I got an attorney here in Charleston,
mm-hmm.
and I knew how to do a FOIA request by now because I've been doing them for several years,
mm-hmm.
and to many different governmental agencies. So, but I thought if I get an attorney to do this, it'll seem more legitimate or have more weight,
right?
That I have legal counsel, and maybe they can't blow me off as much. So I met with this attorney, told him the story and everything, gave him some documentation. He sent a FOIA request to the West Virginia State Police Criminal Intelligence Unit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you know, and I've said here, these guys were at my door. I talked to them on the phone.
Sure.
About a month later, they responded to this FOIA request and said they had no record of Brenda Arthur. Wow.
I just dropped my water. What? That is insane. So was this I'm making air quotes, and I'm not trying to besmirch anybody's reputation, but this sounds like we're into deep state territory. You have an official statement that they have no record of you in there.
Right. And I also, I have his card with his name on it.
I've seen it. Okay,
you saw it. Yeah, I have that personally. I mean, in my possession.
I gotcha.
So to say, and I even had the attorney put in the FOIA request, Brenda Arthur, Brenda K. Arthur, Brenda K.A.Y. Arthur, just the variations of my name that they might have. And before this guy ever came to my house, he looked up my driver's license.
Right.
That he investigated me to see if I had a criminal history.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, whatever other steps they take,
Brenda,
I'm sure he did it.
I don't know how far down I mean, I tried to dig in a little bit with Dave, but, I didn't, want to dig deep enough that he felt he might be giving away trade secrets or, something that might compromise somebody that's still used in the field and whatnot. But I don't know if you've ever heard of Jade Helm. I don't know if you've ever heard of, mapping, the human domain mapping. But just the phone, it knows your heart rate. It knows where you're at, where you go. I mean, they use phones to drop bombs from Predator. Well, not drop them, but pinpoint them from, the famous 2 words from Obama, Predator drones.
Yes.
And so, and we're to the point where American citizens, where there's no record, are, and again, Obama, it's okay to use a Predator drone on an American citizen now. Mm-hmm. So, that smacks of, well, you know what? It's just we're so far down the rabbit hole now, and I know we don't have time to get but it blows my mind. And it's again, people, you and I can yell and scream about it. We can post podcasts about it, but until people actually with ears to hear, God willing, get up and say, hey, I'm a business owner. I am not going to, but you know what? All business owners are cowed right now. They're masked. They are afraid of losing their business because they can only have 50% of the occupancy in now anyway. We're under, and I use the term in the interview with Dave, but we're under medical Sharia,
Yes.
And whether you believe it or not, we are entering mark of the beast level, New World Order, everything that people have laughed about for years. It is on the cusp. Your cell phone, is going to be your master before too long.
Mm-hmm.
And I say you as everybody, this listening
Sure.
audience. But
Sure. Well, after that response, and I told Phil and some others, that I'm in contact with on a national level, I said, this is astounding. And so I decided at that point, okay, I'm going to have my attorney write the Fusion Center, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they would be the ones behind this. Well, he wrote the Fusion Center asking for the same information, saying, he's the legal counsel for me and so forth. And within a couple of weeks, they got back. Now, they're supposed to respond in 5 days when you do a FOIA request.
Sure.
That doesn't mean you get your information. That just means they acknowledge receipt of your request.
Yeah.
But it took about 2 weeks, which, okay, that's fine. I can live with that. And they write back, and in essence, what they said was that I was not entitled to the information they did have. So I have two major governmental agencies. The state police telling me they have no record of me, okay? And the Fusion Center, the Spy Center is what they really are, the Spy Center, saying I wasn't entitled to what they did have.
So we've built this huge system, and it's been turned on an American citizen, and we have gone from either you are either with us or you are with the terrorists in 2001 to now. That term terrorist is very, very, anomalous. It's we don't know, what it is, and it's just, again, it's a slippery slope because it sounds to me like even though you don't have, maybe you know what, Brenda, maybe you just need to load your library at home with thousands of books on how to call people and just how to become Sharia compliant, and maybe this will all go away for you.
Well, it probably would, but I can't do that. I remember, Dave Gobbett said, to be in this business, so-called, it's not a business, but it's a passion for us, to be doing what he does, what I do, what you're doing, what many others are doing. You can't be afraid of death, and you can't fear what is going to happen.
The fear of death is the greatest lie Satan ever told. Oh,
yeah, it really is. And because I even said to Dave, his neck is really out there.
Sure.
He's known across the country and other places, and just the things he does. He goes in and challenges imams, and he got that information out of CAIR's headquarters, and he's really got his neck out there on the line. But he said, you can't be afraid of death. He says, I don't fear it.
No.
And the same thing with Phil Haney. And it did cost him his life because he knew too much.
Talk about the explanatory memorandum, just so that we're touching upon everything, and why, why. I know that maybe we're circling back a little bit to use a White House press terminology. Yeah. But maybe I saw that note there, and I just thought that was very important about the explanatory memorandum and how it was used and everything like that.
Yeah, this is a document that was created by Muslims. In fact, this goes back to about, let me say this before I give you a little history on it. This document is, I call it akin to a general having the battle plans of the enemy. He's got every aspect of how they're going to wage war against him, and the battle plans are there. And
so you've got Hillary's server, basically, is what you're saying. Okay. So sorry, going ahead.
There you go. It was around 2004. And it was at the Chesapeake Bay Bridge in Maryland. And, this is just a few years after 9/11, about 3 years. And so I think a lot of the officers and people, Army, all of them, soldiers were on higher alert than what they are now. Well, maybe they are now because they think that patriots are going to storm the Capitol, I guess. But there was a sense of, people being aware. And so this ranger sees this woman in Islamic garb looking at the underpinnings of the structure of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, and she was taking pictures. So he goes over to her, rightly so, and questions her. And there was a man waiting in the car for her, and he goes back to the car and runs the license and all that, finds out that there's an outstanding warrant for this guy. And so this led to a search warrant for their house. And they get to the house, and down in the basement there was a subfloor. And under this subfloor there were 80 bankers' boxes of documents that were in there. I mean, this was a treasure trove. And basically what they had come across was this guy was more or less the secretary for the Muslim Brotherhood in North America. And as the secretary, he was keeping all the documents. Well, this one document in particular that you referred to, called the Explanatory Memorandum, this was used to bring them to trial, not the people there, but certain terrorists, trying to think of the name of it, the largest terrorist financing trial in American history in Texas,
right,
in 2007. And this particular document, the Explanatory Memorandum, was a very significant document in this trial because it laid out the plans of how they were going to destroy and take over America. And, I mean, everything from finance to education to, banking, I mean, you name it, entertainment, journalism, women's groups. I mean, it just laid out everything. And at the back of this document, was translated. Of course, all these documents had to be translated, but our eyes were never supposed to see this document, especially because, again, it's the battle plan of how they're going to destroy America and take over and establish their caliphate. Mm-hmm. But in the last couple of pages, I think it's page 31 and 32, there's a list of organizations that are their affiliates here in America and of the Muslim Brotherhood. And those organizations are like the Islamic Society of North America and so forth. And one of those was the Islamic Association for Palestine. Mm-hmm. And that organization no longer exists, but CARE took its place because Nihad Awad and a couple of other men were involved in this IAP, or Islamic Association for Palestine. So after the peace accord, remember when the peace accord was signed with Clinton and Arafat and I think Begin on the White House lawn? What was that, back in 98 or so, I believe? If I'm not mistaken. Anyway, this group of Muslims, of the Muslim Brotherhood, were opposed to this agreement or this peace accord. So they got together in Philadelphia to come up with how they were going to fight this and how they were going to go against it. And so that's when CARE, or the Council on American Islamic Relations, was established. I think it was 1999 in America. So it might have been a year or two earlier, but to my best recollection, it was right in that time frame.
But to point out, it was not when Ilhan Omar said that it came about after 2001.
Oh, no.
Okay. I just want to point that out. Yeah, I want to point that out.
Deception.
Absolutely.
So they have been up and running for many years, more than a couple of decades now. And, they are putting their plan into effect. I mean, you can see it. I know Dave, I don't know if he mentioned this in his interview with you or not, but he asked a lot of imams, well, why is it there hasn't been another big attack like 9/11, or since then? And they, what their answer to him is? Everyone he's ever talked to or asked this question says to him, why should we do that when we're winning?
Yeah. Yeah, but that's what I was pointing out with the Patriot Act, 2001. Who lost their freedoms?
Yeah, we're winning. Why should we do another 9/11 style attack when it would set us back 25 years?
How far down how much of it actually is implemented now? I know there's things about education. I know that they're pushing, and have in the past, whole segments of education, and children going home with the assignments of there is no God other than Allah. I mean, how much of it's been deployed? It's amazing to me how far they've gotten. But, when the Muslim Brotherhood is going into the White House during the Obama administration, maybe it shouldn't shock me. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's fine. I don't know that I could give you a percentage, but a great deal of it is.
Sure.
And especially in certain places like in Michigan and in Minnesota.
And
they will reach, when they reach critical mass, and see, they hope to reach critical mass, Sean, by this population business, this refugee business of bringing Muslims in, putting them in small towns, all across America, bringing them to Washington, West Virginia, where there are, 1,200 people that live in Washington, West Virginia. But yet 10 Iraqis were placed in there in 2016, between 2016 and 2015. Well, you have to ask yourself, what are 10 Iraqis doing in Washington, West Virginia?
Mm-hmm.
So again, they have to reach critical mass, and they reach critical mass by bringing more people in, by becoming successful, by people supporting their businesses. I won't support any Muslim-owned business that I'm aware of, And two, there's another whole issue here with doctors. A lot of doctors, Arab Muslim doctors, have been brought into West Virginia. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, from a doctor that I know, that they don't have the student loans and the things that our doctors do when they're getting out of medical school. So they can go to a little cold town, and have and doctor there or have a practice there, because they don't have to worry about paying off $300,000-$500,000 of student loans. They can go in there and work for $40,000 or $50,000, and build a reputation and so forth. So there's just they've just inundated us on every aspect of our society. Mm-hmm. With all of this, with glamorizing, and I call it mainstreaming. They've mainstreamed Muslims. I look for the day, not I'm looking forward to it, but the day when they have a Muslim day at the Capitol, during the legislative session. They're doing that. They've done that in other states prior to COVID. I think Kentucky in 2019 had a Muslim day at the Capitol. And so these are the things, how they normalize themselves.
Is there a Christian day at the Capitol? I apologize, I don't know. Or any other faith? Do we have a Buddhist day? I don't know those things. Maybe I should find out. But it's crazy. And again, it's we've become lapdogs. Or no, not we, because there's still a remnant, but Our leadership has become lapdogs, and they're so afraid of being canceled themselves that they never realize they should turn around and say, wait a minute, you're completely doing everything that you're railing against. Why don't we shut you down? And again, maybe if one or two men had, and I hate that it has to go that far or degrade that far in a civilized manner, especially in the people's house. But maybe if a few delegates stood up and saw those unruly ones out, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but we have to get angry, and we have to stop letting them.
Not only did Speaker Henshaw not punish, the Caputo for that incident, when other people were punished. Ann Lieberman was resigned, and he accepted her resignation, and so forth, and the other things we talked about earlier. But he didn't. All he did, the only so-called punishment that Caputo got, was being put off his committees for the last several days of the legislative session.
Yeah.
Well, it was almost at an end anyway. So he's put off his legislative committees. So what?
Yeah.
But he had no punishment. And you talk about putting him out. He should have been put out of the legislature.
Oh, yeah. He should not have a career right now in civil service. He is not a civil servant. He believes that he is entitled. He's elite.
Yes.
And we don't need that. The time for elitism is, we have to hit a critical mass at some point. And the average American has to find that American spirit within them. I believe, Lord, I hope there is some type of hereditary memory. We have to be the next greatest generation, or there will be no future generations of Americans.
Yes, I have so often said that our government has betrayed us, and we've allowed it. And our government is endorsing and sanctioning people coming into this nation illegally and both legally as well through the visa system and all these other systems, immigration that they come in. And on top of that, to add insult to injury, we're paying for the invasion of our own nation.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, how stupid is that?
Well, absolutely. Brenda, is there anything we haven't touched upon? Is there anything that you want to expand upon? Anything else you want to cover?
Well, I would like to make a comment about, oftentimes, it's been a while, but I'll have people say to me, well, what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And believe me, I've been there, and I'm still there in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what that's like. It's like you've got this thing cooking inside of you, and it's like you've got to do something. I only know, Sean, I can't sit back and do nothing. But what I try to encourage people to do, one of the things, is just like I told you I saw on that website for the Islamic Association of West Virginia, I saw that picture of Nihad Awad there. And I told the state trooper that in my conversation with him.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know, I went back there a couple weeks later and that picture was gone.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I'm inferring that state trooper told them. Because somebody, either they or the guys at the city hall there reported me to the Fusion Center. So it seems likely that they told them.
It sounds to me like there's a channel there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what I encourage people to do is if you run across something, you might not even think at the time that it's something significant. Make a hard copy of it. Print it. Keep a hard copy. I've got lots of things. There's a goal I have, but it's one of those back burner things, and it's going to take me quite a while even to do it. But I want to develop a timeline for West Virginia. And I want to go back and show people over, 5 or 6 years at least, how this is progressing in West Virginia. Because something happens up in the Eastern Panhandle, and the people down here in Southern West Virginia never know about it.
Well,
something happens. Now, the Caputo story of him going crazy, that pretty much got across the state. But there are just different things that happen, where the student in the Eastern Panhandle was told to, recite the Islamic faith pledge. And just different things that are happening, that in Cabell County, he's gone now, but there was a assistant prosecuting attorney that converted to Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And then in another small town in West Virginia, there was the first Muslim running for city council. So these things are going on, and I really want to bring it to light and put it on a timeline to show people kind of the progression and things that have been going on. And even in the schools, I need to encourage people to look into their school boards, see what they're telling, what they're promoting. Look at the curriculum, find out if, in fact, they have dedicated an Islamic prayer room for the Islamic students, the Muslim students, rather. Monitor your Chamber of Commerce. Monitor the Democrat Party. See what they're up to. There are just so many different things. Look at the local churches that are welcoming refugees, because they're probably involved in this interfaith movement. Which is, more diabolical stuff. The shoulder-to-shoulder training where they get, all these different religious groups together. That's sponsored by Muslims. So they're just, really, if they stop and think about it, there are numerous, dozens of things people can do. And you don't have to do everything, but just add one brick to the structure at least.
Amen.
And help us all work together.
You mentioned, and you alluded to, I guess, how California, and it's sort of a bellwether, I guess, is what you were alluding to. And but I want to take a little further. In Europe, we saw the migrant surges, during the first part of actually before the Obama administration, but we saw the migrant surge, for the Syrian refugees there and the fighting age men again. And it's all the same thing. Like I said, it doesn't change. The strategy, whether you plug it in Europe or whether you plug it in Mount Hope, West Virginia, it would be the same strategy. And these people, again, they aren't coming in, I guess what I'm getting at is Tommy Robinson, we're to the point where you've become a Tommy Robinson almost, Tommy Robinson saw, a Muslim sex ring basically, and he could not any longer stand it. And he walked out of his business and it went to blows, and he became ostracized, and he became Islamophobic, and he became the villain in this. And so again, people have to see what's going on. And if you were one of the people that told me, I left my party, or I'm a Democrat, but my party left me, you need to think really hard. And honestly, unless I'm not going to get on the I know that we've changed leadership with the GOP, but this is a call. This isn't just the citizen. This is a call to our elected officials to defend the Republic and to make sure that when we say Montani Semper Liberi, that it is actually going to happen, or step down and let somebody do it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's another thing I'll mention too, as we probably come to a close. I have tried for 5 years, 5 legislative sessions, this being the 5th one, which the attempt this year was more feeble because I kept getting stonewalled. But I have tried to get a refugee bill passed through the legislature. In my mind, the Republicans have no excuse now because in the House of Delegates there are 100 seats, and the Republicans have 77 of those, supermajority. In the state Senate there are 34 seats, and the Republicans have 23, supermajority. They could get this done. But every time over these prior 4 years before this, it's been a Republican that's done something to stonewall it. They wouldn't let it get out of committee.
Exactly.
Nine of them didn't show up to vote on it out of committee one day, and so it was tabled. I mean, these are the games they play. And
I have faith that if we can put a man on the moon, we can draft legislation that would include fair play, but not jeopardize the safety and the security of West Virginians and Americans. I'm certain that we could do that if we put our mind to it.
Yes. This bill is about the Refugee Information Act is what it's called. And of course, the left call it Islamophobic and hatred and everything else. Of course. Mm-hmm. But what it's about, it's holding accountable the Department of Health and Human Resources for how many refugees are coming, what are their ages, what public schools are they in, how many in the family, just the demographics. It's an information bill and a transparency bill to hold them accountable because they don't have to report anything to our legislature.
I wonder what would happen if we started suing the West Virginia Interfaith Refugee Ministry or Catholic Charities just like they sue gun manufacturers every time there's an unvetted attack somewhere. I wonder what would happen.
Boy, I would love that. In fact,
maybe we need that legislation. Do you think?
I wanted to sue the governor this time because of the people aren't allowed in the Capitol, in the people's house. You have to have an appointment. Well, good luck getting an appointment, nowadays.
It's medical Sharia, Brenda.
Yeah.
It's medical Sharia. but I say better in Valhalla than submissive to Allah. So I don't know, but did we cover anything? How can they get in touch with you? Just any final closing remarks? Just let people know, if they want to, or if you feel like it, how where you're at and how they can get in touch with you.
It's interesting. I don't have a website, and I've deferred doing that because with all the other projects and everything, I don't have time to monitor it.
Sure.
And I have looked, for somebody who would volunteer to do that, but so far, haven't found anybody. But when I first started into all this and realized that, what was going on back when I first got back here, Sean, as I mentioned, mm-hmm. I thought, well, I'll just find out about this, and that'll be kind of the end of it, and I'll let some people know. I had no idea where this was going, and I thought that I could just, I was 5, not 65 at the time, about 63 mm-hmm. when I first got back here, and I thought, I'll just live a quiet life. I'm going to semi-retire, and, I was at that age, and, boy, that was just not to be, and gotcha. Here I am at this stage of life, where I thought, I don't have to put my name out there and people know my phone number and, sure. and all that. But that just wasn't to be. And you can't really, get your information out if you're not willing to do that.
Right. I
gotcha. I have that Facebook page, as I mentioned, Secure WV, if they're on Facebook. And I've got to transition to something else as time goes on here. Mm-hmm. I keep hearing that Trump's going to set up a media site. So we'll see about that. But they can contact me on Facebook, Secure WV, and ask, make a request and just say they heard me here and, they'd like to join. Also, they can email me. I give out my email. Everybody in the world has it. It's Brenart, Brenart, Brenart at AOL.com. I'm one of the old AOL users for many years. I've got to transition that too. But those are the two best ways. And then depending upon where things go from there, I'm very happy to give them my phone number, but I just don't want to put it out in a podcast.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. I understand. Well, Brenda, it has been an absolute pleasure. This has been audio dynamite for our listeners, I'm certain. So thank you. And, if anytime, you've got my contact information, anytime you want to reach out, I would love to have you on anytime. And, we'll say our goodbyes off the air there, but I really want to thank you for coming on the Powder Monkey podcast, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime if you need to update anything or just feel like chatting.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Sean.
Absolutely. For God, for country, for truth, for justice, for the Republic. You're listening to the Powder Monkey Podcast on PirateInfoWars.com.
The comment's coming, it's getting near. Our conscience numbing, we have no fear. I called my friends up and they're all here. For pudding and vodka, yeah. There was that